Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to Nat Chat. I'm Nat Eliason, and as you probably know, we're currently exploring what to do as a student or recent graduate trying to succeed outside of the traditional, dissatisfying, and somewhat broken college system. In this episode, we have Kevin Miller. Kevin and I met via Adil Majid, who came on for episode 2, since Adil and Kevin worked together at Spire, which I've also done some search engine work with. Kevin is the director of marketing there, and I wanted to bring him on for the interesting series of jobs and experiences that led him there. Kevin attended Georgetown University, and while everyone else there was focusing on these big, typical careers, he was much more interested in breaking into tech. He became a master at cold emailing people to try to learn from them and work with them, which led to conversations with Evan Spiegel, Mark Cuban, and getting the opportunity to sit in and shadow people doing marketing and other jobs in order to learn from them. He eventually ended up working at Google on their ads team, and after mastering how the ads system works, left to apply it to his own projects, including, among other things, getting thousands of dollars in free Uber rides and free food. So if you need someone to light a fire under your ass for the benefits of cold outreach and direct mentorship, Kevin's the guy. He's relentless, and it's opened every major door in his life, and he shares all of his strategies with you in this episode. But we're going to cover much more than just cold outreach, so let's bring Kevin on now. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you on because we met in a fun way. When I got to SF, my close friend and earlier podcast guest, Adil, told me that somebody he worked with here knew this tactic for getting free Uber rides and insisted that he would always ride Uber Black now because he had all these free credits and that he could help other people get these too. So yep. What's the story there?
Yeah, so the story is I grew very frustrated at the time with my monthly expense for Ubers. And so, I became fascinated with all these different startups that had the give 20, get 20 promotion for inviting a new friend. And so, I invited a bunch of my friends to Uber through email and just like word of mouth and stuff, but I couldn't scale it. So at the time I was nearing the end of my time at Google, and I had learned a bunch about AdWords and how to run efficient campaigns. So I built a basic WordPress site, and I decided to post my Uber code there so that when people typed in Uber free code or Uber promo code or any manifestation of that word, my ad would pop up at number 1. And then when people use the code and they take their first ride, I would get an email that says, Sarah S. from Pennsylvania took their first ride. Congratulations, here's $20. And then at that point, so much credit started accruing. And back then it was all cash. And so I was taking black Escalades everywhere through San Francisco and trading my friends to every ride because it was just a crazy time.
That's great. And how were people finding this page with your Uber code?
Yeah, so I just built a basic AdWords campaign inside of the Google ad platform, and I just had a list of 20 or 30 keywords that I knew had high search volume but low competition, and by virtue of that, low cost per click. So I was making money on the difference between my ad spend and the referral rewards that I got.
And I imagine we're going to touch on some of the ad stuff later when we come back to Google. But you actually got your start in tech in a pretty interesting way, right? And that was Living Social the first company?
Yeah, so Living Social was the first tech company that I ever interned at.
And how did that opportunity come about?
Yeah, so it was actually kind of awkward. The CEO and founder of Living Social went to Georgetown. And so he came to speak at an event and was like giving some advice on how to start your career in tech and things like that. And I knew at that time there was just no way that I was going to be able to apply to Living Social online and get anyone to look at my application. So I figured I better go to the person who's at the top. And I was in the bathroom and washing my hands. And the CEO, Tim O'Shaughnessy, was next to me, and I said, hey, I'm going to start here. I know this is very awkward. We're in the bathroom together, but I love the company. I want to do product development, and I don't know if you're taking interns, but if you are, like, here's my email. Can I have yours? And I'll email you my qualifications.
Right. At least you guys weren't at the urinal when you started.
Oh, yeah. Wait. I had to wait. I almost did it then. I had to wait.
Oh, man. But were you qualified at all for this role that you were trying to sell him on?
Honestly, no.
So how did you convince him to hire you?
He said no one's come up to me in that method before and been so adamant about learning. And he said, we're a young company and we need people who are that curious. And he basically complimented me on hounding him in a respectful and polite way. And I think it also helped, we had the same alma mater. So he was probably doing a little bit of goodwill. And, when I got there, it just made me work harder because he took a chance when he didn't have to.
And what was the role? You said product manager?
I was a product development intern. So we were building new experiences for people to do, whether it was going to the zoo or, going on a vacation, and you would buy those through Living Social. And so we were just, doing user interviews and understanding what made people want to use Living Social again.
And what made you interested in trying out that kind of role?
Yeah. So, at Georgetown, it's a largely finance-based school. And my older brother went there, worked on Wall Street for several years, hated his life. And I wasn't naturally excited about working in Excel and focus on that stuff. So I was one of the outliers in my class. Most people wanted to either go into, finance or consulting. And I found it way more exhilarating and just interesting to be involved in working at a business for a product that I used. So I used Living Social for my own personal fun. And I thought if I can work there too, that would make it, a pretty cool experience. And I'd probably be good at it because I cared about the product.
Were there any classes or work you were doing before that in particular that made you interested in coming at it from the product development side? Or was that just where you could fit in and had the opportunity?
I think that's just where I could fit in. Yeah, they had an intern class and they essentially asked you what your skills were and where you'd find interest. And then they placed you on certain teams. And so that was just pretty much how the chips fell at the time.
And so what happened after the end of that internship? Did you go back? Did you work somewhere else after?
Yeah, so I ended up working, that was during the summer of my sophomore year. And then I started working there on Fridays during my junior year. And I grew to have some pretty good relationships with some other older employees there. And they said, hey, if you really want to give this tech thing a try, you got to get to San Francisco, because that's where all the best companies are. And so someone showed me an internship at True Ventures, which is the early stage venture capital firm based here in San Francisco. And they said, they take 12 kids a year. You learn how to, you work at one of their portfolio companies, but then on Fridays, you go and learn about how they choose their founders and what their investment philosophy is. So it's kind of a hybrid program. And so when I learned about that, I decided that would be my number one choice. And very fortunately, I got accepted to it, and I did that my junior summer. But
you applied to it in kind of an interesting way, right? How did you get that opportunity?
Yeah, so I looked up the home and work address for two of the partners.
How did you find their home address? Just in the Yellow Pages?
You know what? I think, have you ever heard of the service called Spokeo?
No, what is that?
I think back in 2012, that was one of the first services that allowed you to, it's kind of like Email Hunter or these other types of tools that help you find people's information. And so again, I wrote a FedEx letter to these people because I knew Twitter, email, these other things would just be overly saturated mediums where people try to reach out to these people. And so I wrote a letter and said, hey, exactly that. I wanted to reach out to you in a unique way because this is a unique internship. There's thousands of people applying, but here's the list of 3 reasons why I think I deserve this opportunity. And I put, P.S. I know this is weird that I have your home address. Please don't freak out. I just needed to make sure I reached you. And they thought that was funny for the most part.
That's great. So how did that opportunity go when you got there? And what type of work were you doing?
Yeah, so I worked for a company called On the Air, which was a video chat website. Basically, they would have someone like Stephen Curry come on, and he'd be on the air, kind of like Facebook Live now. It actually is very similar type of product. And I was doing business development for them, and it was only 6 people at the company, seed funded from True Ventures. And it was just basically a crash course on how to acquire users for free and get featured in different places and understand what type of content people wanted to hear to make it spread. And then, like I said, on Fridays, every Friday, they would bring in 3 entrepreneurs that they recently funded. And they would explain how they got to that career path that they were on and what made, why they invested in that company. And essentially, they gave advice on how to have a good, successful career in Silicon Valley like they had.
And did that make you really interested in starting your own thing, or what was the path after that?
So that made me very interested in starting my own thing, but it also made me much more realistic about what it takes and understanding that, you've got to be 100% committed to whatever idea you pursue. But it's, much more than that. Oftentimes it takes an incredible team and the right connections to have your idea heard. And, I just, all the skills that it takes to effectively test a an early version of your product. A lot of it just just a good lesson on how hard it is to get that to that place. So that's something I still hope to do in my career, but I just decided to take the route of learning from other people on a small team and seeing where that takes me.
And is that part of why you went to Google after graduation?
So after graduation, I had trouble getting a job because I was, going and trying to, reach out to all these startups, but I was in DC and I had still had limited, it's just so competitive. I still had limited experience. Internships only count for so much, right? I had no interest in Wall Street or consulting. So then I reached out to a founder in the True Ventures portfolio, and I basically pitched him on being their first marketing hire. And this company was called Message Me. It was a text messaging app, kind of similar to GroupMe or WhatsApp. And I was, creating a college marketing program for them.
Okay, so you were helping them pitch to colleges or to students?
I was helping them get college ambassadors on every campus in the United States and get them to advocate for using the app and just help with its word of mouth and virality.
Got it. So how did that go?
That went okay. That went okay at best.
Why do you say that?
And it was a big learning experience. Well, when I started there, we just hired the 10th, I think she was the 20th or 30th employee at Facebook. Her name was Allie Rosenthal. And so she came in and was like extremely sharp and just knew way more than I did. And it was just a crash course in like how to acquire users and how to like have a process for everything that you do. And I came in there with just a vague idea of what I wanted to accomplish, but no real roadmap of how to get there. So that was like my first, I'm thankful for that experience because I think that's the only way I would have actually learned that. Is like going through that. But anyways, that company got acqui-hired by Yahoo at like maybe my 6th or 7th month mark. But I didn't go with that acquisition. That was just a talent acquisition for an engineering team. And then at that point, I was struggling to pay my rent shortly thereafter with no job.
No job and an SF.
And
right?
an SF, yeah. And fortunately, at that point, I got the job at Google where I was on the AdWords team.
So we'll come back to Google in a second, but it seems like you have had this habit throughout all these stories of reaching out to people and being pretty forward about wanting to work with them, wanting to learn from them. How did that habit start for you?
That's a great question. I think it started with a conversation with my dad, actually. We were talking about how to be creative about getting your foot in the door because we learned that, oftentimes it's not necessarily how qualified you are, but if you can just get in front of the decision maker and be genuine with them, oftentimes they'll get you, they'll take a chance on you. And I knew that about getting into college. I did something similar to get into Georgetown where I knew my grades weren't, I had a good GPA, but the SAT score was definitely not what they wanted. So I went to the campus and like was knocking on the door of the dean and they happened to be in at the time. And I was like, hey, I just decided to stop by. No one asked me to be here, but here's the reasons why I think I should be admitted. And I think that played a good role in me getting accepted there.
And you had no appointment or anything? You just...
No appointment. I acted as if I did.
You just showed up. That's great.
I acted as if I did. But anyways, I think, just those creative ways, people value those ideas. And then I think if you're the employer and someone comes to you and is, very direct and not afraid to share their opinion in a respectful way, you just believe that there may be other good ideas to come if they approach you in that way. So I've just always had more success getting my foot in the door if I take that method rather than applying online or sending an email or something of that nature.
Has it ever gone poorly or has anybody ever reacted negatively?
Oh yeah. One person whose name I won't mention, was very upset about me acquiring a home address, which I get. So that's one. Another is I made small mistakes like writing an email that was way too long. If you write an email, I now know if you write an email to someone who is very busy and has a career path that you want, you've got to make the subject line extremely short and interesting so that they first open it. And then secondly, make your points just like 3 or 4 bullet points and action item for them. Even small things like, do you mind getting back to me next week? It should be, do you have time Thursday at 2:15 p.m.? Those types of things I've seen make a big difference. But a couple people responded saying, I don't have the time to read this long of an email. If you can rephrase it in less than 2 sentences, I'll read it.
That's really nice of them. A lot of the times people just archive it if it's too long or if they feel like they don't have time.
I had success with the subject line that had something to do with advice for aspiring entrepreneur. People, I think, like if they're successful in their career, I think 7 out of 10 people are eager to pay it forward, so to speak. Someone help them, and if you can position yourself as just someone who only wants advice and nothing more, if they're free, oftentimes people will answer.
Yeah, it makes a big difference if they don't think that you're trying to get something from them besides just advice. And if you can do it where you're only going to ask 1 or 2 questions, not 10 questions in one email.
Right. The other magical piece about this is doing it, if you're in college, doing this while you're a student and putting student in the subject line. It just, if I was to do it now, people would think, well, this guy works at Spire now. He probably wants something else from me. There might be an ulterior motive. But if you can prove that you're legitimately a student, you just want advice, they're more likely to reach back out, I feel.
Especially if they see like director of marketing in the
It's just
signature. It looks very different.
It looks very different, but if you're a junior at Carnegie Mellon, I think they are more inclined to help.
Did you study anything related to entrepreneurship in tech in college, or was it unrelated?
I did study. My minor was in entrepreneurship. And so that program was just getting started towards the end of my college career, but we did have one class where the founders of Sweetgreen were the year before me, and the senior capstone class is to create your own business.
Oh, fun.
And so you create your own business, you do the whole business plan, and then you go and you actually try to make it happen. And then at the end of the year, there's like a seed funding like rocket pitch type of thing. And so they give out, up to 50 grand to 3 different companies to help them get going.
And that's money from the school?
Money from the school.
Huh.
Yep.
So what was your business?
So my business was called Bounce, which was, do you remember the Square card reader?
Yeah.
That plugs into the bottom of your iPhone? Mm-hmm. I wanted to replace the antiquated ID scanner at bars.
Oh, okay.
And so I felt like there was a really popular bar that was right off the campus from Georgetown.
Which one?
That it's called Rhino. It was like the number 1 bar. And the other one was Third Edition. Yeah. But Third Edition got shut down because they had too many underage people coming in. And the pain point is extremely great. If you lose your liquor license, it costs $100K to get it. If you lose it, you're fined close to that as well. Can't reapply for a year. So I thought, okay, if I can go in and replace and actually give them a card reader, when the cops come, they'll know they're doing it the right way. There's technology behind it. They're checking every single person. And the app had basic functionality. It said a big X or a green check mark, and it would give their name and it would strip out all the all the identifiable information about them and just say yes or no. Which was ironic because I was 20 at the time, and that that product wouldn't have helped me. But I knew it wouldn't go to market until I was 21.
Were you part of the problem? Or?
I think I might have been. But anyways, yeah, I ended up getting $2,000 for that project, that idea. But it just didn't go much further after graduation because I had no experience with anything other than door-to-door selling. I knew there was challenges to scaling it, and that was right when I moved out to San Francisco and started working for MessageMe.
Did the tech on the app work, or was it a prototype?
The tech on the app actually worked.
Oh, very cool. Was it better than normal scanners, or because people? In
my opinion, it was.
Okay.
It needed some more testing, but I think it's still an interesting business because right now the scanner that you would get at a normal bar is like 30 pounds. It's a big black
they're these huge boxes,
and no one wants to use it because it's not mobile. And it's not a really sexy space, but a lot of bar owners that I went and spoke to in person said, we trust our bar, or we trust our staff to be able to do this the right way. At that time, I thought that was an excuse for still admitting underage kids because of how much money you could make with how crowded the bar could get. But who knows? Maybe I'll revisit it at a later date.
Maybe you've got it in the back of your mind.
Yeah.
So after you left this company after they got acqui-hired, when did Google come into the picture?
That was I think I started at Google maybe 3 to 3.5 months after.
Okay. And were you sending personal mail to Larry Page to get it?
Oh, yeah.
Or yeah.
But those went unanswered.
Yeah.
For that, I went and reached out to a former classmate who was offered a job at Google and actually didn't take it. It was the only person that I knew that was connected. And at those bigger companies, it's 1,000,000 times more likely that you're going to get an interview if you get a referral from someone who's actually at the company. But I didn't know anyone, so I had to go a degree further out. And I had to beg him to email the recruiter because he thought it was very odd. Why? He said, I want to set your expectations. I don't expect her to answer because she offered me the job and I didn't take it. But she did answer, and luckily I got introduced that way. And, I called as many other people that I knew that had worked in advertising before and just watched every YouTube video on how Google Ads work and prepared the best I could. And fortunately was offered a job there.
And when you were applying, you'd been doing mostly sales before, right?
Yeah. So, at Message Me, it was kind of a business development sales type of role. At Google, it was a sales role, but it was an account management sales role. So you were in Google Analytics and in AdWords, advising on the marketing strategy. But at the end of the day, I was incentivized by, having people spend more money on AdWords. So it was kind of a quasi sales and marketing role. And through that, I realized that I didn't want to have a career in sales and I wanted to make a full switch into growth marketing. And that's when I decided to leave Google 2 years later to go pursue that more intensely.
Yeah. Well, but you were there for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So what did that progression look like? Because I imagine right when you started, you didn't want to jump ship.
Yeah. So right when I started, I just was trying to get as much knowledge as I could about how advertising worked. I really didn't have a good understanding. The training there was incredible. Before we even got on the phone with any customers, we went through at least a month and a half of training, which some would say is overkill, but we basically learned the science of how Google Ads work and every single place on the internet where an ad could be placed and how to measure them. And then we added in the customer element to understand how they thought about it and how to implement different strategies. So that was extremely interesting for, the first year we were working with SMB clients and then slowly moved my way up to manage people who were spending more money. And then at the end of the first year, I realized I had a hunch that I didn't want to do sales forever. So there's two sides of sales, one account management, the other is like a hunting sales role where you're going and finding companies where you are building your own book of business. In the first year at Google, I was given a book of 100 people where I would manage their ads. So the second year I went and was calling on startups in San Francisco that had just raised money and convincing them to start advertising for the first time.
And did you like that? Was it interesting work or?
Very interesting work, and so interesting that I realized that I wanted to go be the guy on the other end of the phone. So I was speaking with the first marketing hire or the VP of marketing at all of these startups that I was reading about. And I realized, rather than doing this for 50 people, I want to concentrate my efforts and be the guy in-house that's doing this, and being able to really control what acquisition channels they use. And that's kind of what I'm doing in my current role.
Yeah. Well, you coming from Google and having all of that AdWords management experience, you're probably the perfect person to go do it in-house somewhere and to help with the paid acquisition.
Right.
So was that fairly easy transitioning from that to leading paid acquisition at now Spire?
Well, I think that, there were some opportunities to go to places like Lyft and Airbnb and be a paid acquisition specialist. But when I thought about it, I much more admired the career path of true growth marketers where they have experience with paid channels such as AdWords and Facebook, but also SEO, email marketing, affiliate marketing, and all these different channels, because I felt like that would just make me a more dynamic marketer if I could have that type of experience. So I quit Google after that 2-year mark and decided to take 3 months off and work on my own projects and try to figure out how I could get some experience with those other types of acquisition channels. And at that time, my favorite startup was called Doorman, which is the last mile package delivery company based in San Francisco. And so I emailed the founders, again, to your point of kind of reaching out to the person at the top, and said, I love the service. Is there anyone, who's doing marketing that I could learn from? And that's how I met my mentor in San Francisco, who's the head of growth and marketing there. His name's Chris Gaddick. And everything that I've learned about being a lean, not to use a buzzword, but data-driven marketer was from Chris. And so that type of mentorship has kind of, in my opinion, taken me to the next level when it comes to marketing.
And you were probably able to help them with some of their paid acquisition work, right?
Yeah. So at the time, they wanted to experiment with Google Ads. So it was very fortunate that was my kind of lead in. That's why Chris wanted to take the time to talk to me. Now, so we went and got some beers and chatted about what we might be able to do for them advertising wise. Unfortunately, the ads never worked. But at that point, he and I had built up a good personal relationship to where he still wanted to help. And so ever since then, I've been offering free help to them. And he's been doing the same for me. It's been a great, mentorship, mentor-mentee relationship that's grown into friends and stuff like that.
And it started off, it seems like, fairly informal. There was never any like, please train me. It was, let me help you and let me observe from you. So
Totally. Yeah. I just said, look, I'm not going to ask for $1 from you. I just want to sit in the room when you're building campaigns, when you're, trying to different SEO strategies on your site, when you're doing your email marketing. I just want to be there. I don't care what time. And I think he appreciated that. And yeah, I mean, now I would work for him. I would have him be an advisor to Spire. I would do anything because I just learned so much from his previous 10 years of marketing experience.
And you were working with them for about 3 months before Spire started, right?
Yeah, and still I was doing much more active stuff with them. Now I stop by the office and kind of ask how stuff's going, get updated. But yeah, at that time I was actively helping them build out their email marketing and SEO and in different cities, and I was doing their Google ads.
And you mentioned that there were some other projects in there too that you were experimenting with to pick up more of this growth marketing stack.
Yeah.
So what were some of those other projects?
So back to the Uber referral code stuff, I tried to scale that into a larger business. But there was it was very fragile because these companies kept changing their offers. But I would do that same referral strategy for Uber, Lyft, Airbnb, Hotel Tonight, Munchery, you name it. If there was non-demand service in San Francisco, we tested it.
So you've just been living off of the VC funded discount codes.
Yeah,
since
absolutely.
You got here.
There was a good year where I didn't travel in anything other than a black Escalade, and I never paid for a meal.
Oh man, Postmates, Uber Eats, or
Uber Eats, Postmates, and Munchery and Spoon Rocket before that went out of business.
It's funny how many of my friends in marketing do similar things with these codes once they come out. Another strategy I've heard, and this is probably going to get ruined as we talk about it more, but when a new service launches, you can take their affiliate code, you put it in Retail Me Not, and then you pay a bunch of people on Fiverr to vote up your version of the code, and then you'll be the number one result when people go look for
that one
codes.
Is even more genius than anything I've done, because then you get the free organic traffic. I was still making money on the difference between the paid ads and the
That's
referral.
True. You still have to pay for the ads.
But that one was more sustainable. I mean, I've been doing this for my friends and myself for 2.5, 3 years, and it's never stopped working.
That's crazy.
It's been harder to do. We've had to switch to Bing,
right?
Of all ad platforms.
You got kicked off of Google, right?
Yeah. But yeah, and then the other project I did was I started this small company with my friend of mine named Justin that was building custom Snapchat filters for bars and nightclubs in San Francisco and Los Angeles. And so essentially we were going and becoming their Snapchat digital marketing agency. And, based on if they had a brunch, if they had some type of happy hour event, we would go and do the design, and then we would put up the filter to be active on their location during the hours where they felt like they'd have the most foot traffic. And then we tried to have offers in the filters and get people to buy more drinks based off of the filter that was, or food item based off the filter that we showed.
That's fun. How did that go?
That went actually pretty well. We ended up, at its height, we had 15 bars and nightclubs in San Francisco and Los Angeles that we were working with. But it was just myself and my partner, Justin. And this was right when I was joining Spire. And there was just no time to excel at Spire and do this. So when I was hired at Spire, that was kind of a trade-off that we made, was that this would stop and I would just focus on my full-time thing.
Got it. Is Justin still working on that? Or
he's not, because we found it, again, kind of hard to scale that door-to-door type of sales. We had to go in person. But these bar owners didn't really fully understand Snapchat. A lot of them are older. They're outside of that prime age demo. And I had to really work to establish good personal relationships with them in order for them to trust me and understand that I knew what I was doing when it came to marketing, and then they would pay us. But yeah, for a good 4 or 5 months, I mean, we probably made $5,000 a month, and yeah, it was pretty good.
So if anybody's listening and wants a side hustle idea,
yeah, go do that. I'll pay your rent at least.
It'd be interesting trying to sell that to the performers as well, because a lot of them get a certain take from the door, right? Yeah. Or take from drink sales. And so I wonder if DJs would be interested in getting filters for their events too, if they aren't already doing it.
I'm sure they would, or they're probably already doing it. We saw that a lot of people are only focusing on building websites where you buy a filter for your birthday or a wedding or something like that. Filters are $9.99 and it's extremely crowded. But we thought, okay, where could we go where it's a little bit less sexy and there's recurring revenue? And that was the B2B strategy.
Makes sense.
So we learned a lot. We built a website. We used Intercom. We experimented with Facebook and Google Ads. That's how I felt like I've been able to acquire these skills, is by just applying those types of acquisition channels to a business that I really care about. Then I drill in and I try to actually solve the problem. And as a result, I'm learning without realizing it.
Well, and you've been fortunate in that you had that hands-on experience at Google where you were able to really dive deep on AdWords and paid acquisition, which is traditionally kind of a hard type of marketing to learn because nobody wants to give you
their money
budget. Yeah. No one wants to give $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 to somebody who's unpracticed and is going to lose it all on poorly converting ads.
And that was one of the reservations that Spire had when I was hired, because we felt like we could do very well on Facebook, but I hadn't managed monster budgets on Facebook yet. But the ad analysis skill set is transferable from AdWords to Facebook. And so, it's about reading that documentation, watching videos, talking to people who have run campaigns, and then soon enough, 1 month of spending $10K and you'll get a hang of it.
So it was pretty easy to pick up Facebook ads just by transferring over some of that from Google AdWords.
Totally.
So what else have you had to learn and figure out since you started at Spire then?
I had no idea how to efficiently do email marketing.
Okay.
So that was one major thing in terms of like picking the right tool and understanding the nuances of deliverability and making sure that the email actually ends up in the inbox and not the spam box or the promotions box. There's definitely an art to that. I had a little bit of knowledge about Amazon, but we've been able to grow that business pretty substantially in terms of getting good reviews and increasing the revenue by like 4 or 5 times since when I started. Well,
and going back to getting offline, you once flew to Amazon's office to try to get some stuff changed, right?
Yeah, so that was a work event, but that changed everything. These in-person interactions that you have with people, being able to just understand what they're motivated by and how you can fit into that. And, the person that I met with was my age, and we both wanted the same thing, which was to see Spire do more sales on Amazon. Yeah. And, we got along very well, and now that was the ticket in terms of us being able to do much more sales volume on the platform.
So what does your process usually look like when you identify that there is some part of the skill set that you want to get better at? And how do you go about starting to learn that and picking it up?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I do a lot of my own independent research, kind of like when you and I met and we talked about Pat Flynn and how he's been able to make so much money from the passive income blog. And I knew a little bit about that, and I had read about all of the stuff that he had done, but I didn't know if it was for real or not. So I try to find people that are either a friend or a friend of a friend where I can verify, hey, is this strategy for real? Like, does this person actually make a living this way? And then I just approach them and, respectfully and say, hey, I don't know much about what you do, but I'm really interested in learning more. If it's cool with you, could we talk for 30 minutes about what you do and how you got involved in it? And typically people say yes, and I'm able to, learn from that. And then this next step after that, if I have the time and if the other party is interested, is working for them for free. That's worked for me over and over again. Is being able to just volunteer your time to help do the tasks that are too tedious or that this person doesn't have time to get to. And then you prove that you actually are genuine in wanting to learn, and that's it. And typically you can stick around and pick up the skills.
Has there been anything not marketing related that you've done that with, where you've done some free work for someone to learn from them?
I don't know.
and if not, what would you want to do for free?
I know that for sure. I need to learn how to cook.
Oh,
I need to learn how to cook. My mom asked, I just turned 26. My mom's still getting me some birthday gifts. So she asked what I want, and I said, I'd love to take a cooking class. But I looked at Sur La Table in San Francisco, and you have to have some level of skill in order to start there. So I need someone to basically go over, hey, these are all the foods that classify with each food group. And this is how we make chicken parmesan. This is how we make basic meals that I would make on a weekly basis. And that's what I think would be really interesting to learn. But I have looked at platforms like Patreon and other platforms where Google used to have a service called Helpouts, where you could pay someone $25 and they would Skype with you and show you how to play guitar.
Oh, they were going to try to integrate that with Google Glass for a while. That was one of the selling points.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that business was deprecated now, but that's, if I have a little bit of free time, I think I would reach out to someone who's a really good cook and see if they could help give me some free tips.
And that's what you meant by Patreon, finding people on there who are creating information around it and just trying to reach out to them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's a good idea, because people who are on there are probably already used to helping their community in some way and engaging with it. So they're probably good targets for reaching out to.
Yeah. That, and then if I've just seen, if someone helps you, you go out of your way to help them, and it's just like a nice cycle of doing the right thing, and it seems to work out well. I'm a firm believer in karma. So when someone reaches out to me and says anything like, hey, can you help me answer this question about marketing, or what neighborhood should I live in San Francisco? I always make sure to do that because someone did that for me.
And going back to what you were saying before too, about people higher up in the field who are totally happy to answer questions. It's something that, again, everyone's had the experience of being helped, and so they want to help people too.
I think a mistake that some people make, and when I encourage my friends to take this tactic when they're finding jobs, the sentiment is usually something to the effect of, oh, I couldn't bother that person. Or I wonder what they'll think of me if they get a note from me. They'll probably think that you are courageous for reaching out to them, and they might just get back to you. And if they don't, they don't. But you write a note that's very nice, and maybe they just didn't have time to get to it. But I've always believed that if you don't ask, you'll never know, or if you ask, you shall receive. Conversely, and that seems to, if you err on that side, more opportunities seem to come your way.
Yeah, you never know what it'll turn into, and it's also not just a good way of getting information, but if you're doing any kind of freelancing or consulting, it's a good way to land work too. Kind of like we've been talking about. I mean, that's how we ended up working together, was you were just curious about some of the SEO and content stuff. And, we just talked about it really casually. And then it was, hey, if you want me to come help with it, like happy to do that. Or if you want to do it your own, like that's fine too. It's just both being committed to like sharing information is a way more authentic interaction and valuable than when it's just sales all the time.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I remember, Adil, who you had mentioned, was on the podcast earlier. Ever since the day I started, he said, hey, you got to meet my roommate because you guys all work on these different side projects and they're very interesting. I knew nothing about the blog or podcast or anything like that. And then, when we met up, like you said, we just was an engaging conversation about different marketing experiments and projects. And then it just turned out that, our blog was very, needed a lot of TLC. And you have the skill set to do that, and it's an awesome chance for me and my other coworkers to learn about how to get more, organic visibility on your blog.
And now we get to hang out and do a podcast episode.
Right, exactly. Numerous benefits have come from
Numerous. So you said you minored in entrepreneurship in college. What were you majoring in?
My major was just business. That's what it was general business classes. I knew I had no interest in accounting, and I knew I didn't want to major in finance. And so the next thing was this general business major. So you were taking marketing classes, entry-level economics classes, and things like that. But I was always most inspired by the entrepreneurial classes and the stories that I had heard. Like I said, the Sweet Green founders were a year before me, and there were a few other, entrepreneurs who had gone, and right after college, this is what they started working on stuff. One classmate of mine is this guy named James Lee, who lives in San Francisco now. He started his company in the class we were talking about, and I think 6 months ago it got acquired by Meltwater. So he's been able to go straight from college to do that experience, and now is working there. So I just am way more inspired by those stories than, and I think you can learn way more than going to a bigger company, but that's just my personality.
Well, and even if the entrepreneurship classes don't teach you that much about entrepreneurship, which at a lot of schools
they don't.
Yeah, that was the problem at Carnegie. There was maybe one professor who was really good, and the school kicked him out.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was a pretty unfortunate situation.
Yeah.
But Max Friedman, who was on an earlier episode, he also went to school at Georgetown, and he studied entrepreneurship, and he also said the classes weren't that useful, but he met so many other interesting people in those classes that he ended up working with them, and he was able to work on his startup straight out of college.
Awesome.
Just because of the other people he met there, even if the classes weren't super applicable.
Yeah. You meet people who are like-minded, and as long as you can walk away with the general theme that you can control your own financial destiny and you can control your own workplace happiness as a result of being an entrepreneur, or unhappiness, depending on how your adventure goes.
It's a roller coaster.
It's a roller coaster, but at the end of the day, it's rewarding because you know that you're working for yourself and you're putting your best foot forward and you're kind of in control. So if you walk away from that, then you can learn the skills through these projects that I've talked about.
Oh, definitely. Were there any non-marketing classes, or non-business classes, I should say, that you've kept with you that have been particularly useful that would seem unrelated, but that you got a lot out of?
Yes, this is funny. I took public speaking A and public speaking B at Georgetown. Typically, people take neither, or if they take, they would only take one. That was a very painful class because every class you arrived and the teacher gave you a 5-minute assignment where you would get up in front of the class and then she would hand you the prompt of what you were going to talk about.
So all impromptu?
All impromptu. Sometimes there would be planned speeches, but they would be much longer, somewhere 10, 15 minutes. But oftentimes every single student would get up every class and give a 5-minute impromptu speech. And what you learn is that you understand you might use all the time. You might have certain hand gestures or certain body language that doesn't make you look good. And it's all on video. I mean, it's very personally, it exposes you personally. But after you go through that process for a year or a semester or two, you realize that, you're orders of magnitude better at public speaking than you ever were before. And that has helped me a lot in the workplace, I feel.
That's an amazing skill for anyone to develop. And you are really well spoken. It's clearly been helpful. I mean, if you want to do one thing to sound more intelligent and more sure of yourself, practicing speaking through something like that, or even just recording your voice for a while and picking up on the verbal tics and things like that is huge. I had a class in high school, actually, and it was a science class, but we had to present every week. And the teacher would cut you off if you used filler words during it. Oh, wow. Or if you made any mistakes, you'd have to just keep starting over. Really brutal in the beginning. But just like you said, after a year of really intense speaking feedback, it's amazing how big of a difference it makes.
Basically, the teacher said, look, everyone here is going to be embarrassed, so don't worry about it. Just try to be yourself. And there were times where you would get laughed at, but then your friend would go up and you would laugh at them. It was all like a fun and games environment. And when we started thinking about it that way, we would watch ourselves on the TV screen and you would cringe watching yourself, but then you wouldn't make that mistake again. And when you go into the workplace or you are just out in public and you're presenting to other people, having a conversation, you can be confident because you know you've had that training.
And it'll probably make you more confident with doing this kind of outreach that we've been talking about too.
Totally.
You also reached out to Mark Cuban once, right?
I did.
How did that go?
So I'm a huge Orlando Magic fan, and he obviously owns the Dallas Mavericks. So the Mavericks were playing the Magic on the night that I emailed him. So the subject line was something along the line of me talking trash to him about how we were going to beat his team.
To be fair, that's probably a good way to get him to open your email.
Right. Yeah. And so I asked for an internship in the email. And I either wanted to work, I would work anywhere he wanted me to, but I tried to convey that I would work at any of his startups or I would work, in his investment office or for the Mavericks, anything. And he responded back twice, both times saying no.
You asked him a second time?
I asked him a second time. Okay. The first time he said he didn't have the time to engage in this because he was involved with the NBA lockout, which was actually, very taxing for the owners. And then I thought that was an excuse to just kind of like shrug it off. But then, so I followed up and I was just more adamant about how I tried to have him think about what it was like when he was my age. And if he was emailing someone, I basically used the line that I'm positive he would email twice just to double check and leave no door unopened or whatever the saying is. And he responded and he said, I appreciate the persistence. I really do. But I honestly just don't have the time for this. I've got to figure out the lockout stuff. Best of luck. And hopefully we'll meet at some point in the future.
That's definitely one of those personalities where you can get away with challenging them based on who they are, right? Cuban's definitely one of those guys where you can say, like, I know you would do this if you were in my position.
Yeah. And he basically was like, yeah, fair, but I just don't have the time to deal with you. But it says a lot about that person's character because he doesn't have to respond to me. No one's writing about the fact that he's taking the time to respond back to a college kid he's never met, but he has that like desire, like, well, pay it forward and respond even if it is a no. So I just respected that a lot, and it gave me more motivation to reach out to so many other people. But I would say, 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10 of people you email or you write to just don't respond. But that's par for the course. You just got to keep going.
Definitely. Do you remember if you read anything or used any resource to learn how to write these cold emails to people? Or was that something you learned in school? Did you just pick it up by practice?
I did have an entrepreneurship class, the one I've talked about where we started the business, where we would write practice emails and we would focus on being precise and making it super short and get to the point. But I found that in practice, when I was actually emailing someone I wanted to get a hold of, there was so much information I wanted to get out that I thought would be compelling for them to respond, that's when I started writing too long of emails, getting responses back saying I don't have the time to read all that, and then realizing, hey, they just need the top 2 bullet points as to why they should spend 15 minutes with you on the phone, and then send.
It'd be fun if we can either find one of your old emails and include it, or maybe even just link to some good example ones.
I can definitely, my best one is the email I told you about with Evan Spiegel.
Oh, yeah. Tell us the story.
Yeah. So I had just graduated from college. It was early summer of 2013. Snapchat was like a Series A company, if that. Maybe they were raising a Series A or just finished. And so I emailed Evan. Subject line was just 15 minutes on the phone with an aspiring entrepreneur. And so he responded back and he was like, yeah, hey, like my colleague Christina can schedule the call. So I remember being home in Florida and taking the call. And we probably spent 30 to 45 minutes on the phone. And we quickly established, that he couldn't hire me, which was my main ask, because it was only 8 engineers or 10 engineers at the time. But then he went on to just say, hey, look, I can't hire you because your skill set's not necessary at this stage of the company, but I want to give you a bunch of advice. So here it goes. And he just went on a rant about how, you've got to be working for yourself and don't, go and work at one of those major big companies like Facebook or Google, which I did. I needed the rent money.
Evan, if you're listening, Kevin didn't take your advice.
Right. I tried to, but I had to fallback plan. But he was just, sort of hell-bent on following your own vision and having conviction in what you're doing. And he did mention, I think Facebook's first jab at Snapchat was something called Poke. It wasn't the actual Poke, but it was their first failed attempt to replicate Snapchat. It had just come out. And so he was, talking very strongly about how Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook would never be able to take down Snapchat. And that's why when I started to read those articles about how he turned down the $3 or $4 billion offers from Facebook and Google, it didn't surprise me because 2-3 years prior, he was saying, I'll never sell to Facebook. We're going to see this thing through. We believe it's a viable business. And really his point was, it matters what happens to the business, but it's much more about the whole journey and the learning experience and the fact that this was his baby and that he was going to do everything in his power to make it successful and make it very valuable for the people that were using it.
I think they're the only ones who have turned down those big Facebook acquisitions, right? Because all the other ones, Instagram, WhatsApp, Oculus, they all got sucked up.
And financially, it's incredible for those founders. The Instagram stuff was a $1 billion acquisition, but a lot of it was stock. And it's probably worth, 10 times what it was, even at the buyout point.
And there were only, 10 employees then?
Right.
Exactly. Insane.
Crazy. But, those founders don't know what it's like to take a company public, whereas Evan does. And he did it at a $25 billion valuation. So obviously there's tough times for Snapchat now and there's a lot to prove, but I think that just goes back to his point of being in it with your team, not wavering, and being passionate about what you're working on. Yeah.
So as you've been going through all of this during college, post-grad, unrelated to getting nasty emails about finding people's home addresses, sure, do you have a favorite failure or screw up along the way?
Oh man. Yeah, many. So at Message Me, I had no analytical skills and I was very new to using Excel and understanding how to really prove ROI and on ad spend or any other type of initiative we were doing. And so my boss at the time was a former Wall Street person. And so there was a couple very tough months where it wasn't just one failure. It was basically I didn't have the skill set. The skill set was expected of me. And every day going into work, when I came home from work, I would call my friends who just got on Wall Street and ask them to teach me how to understand how to do true financial analysis. And it was just very embarrassing and I started doubting myself. And it's through those like intense pains or places where you're second guessing your skills that if you can break through that and just, bear down and try to develop those skills, once you do, you have them for life. And so, there's a lot of failures, but I really remember that one. It was just a very painful experience where I knew I didn't have the skills and it was just up to me to challenge myself to acquire them.
And also slightly funny because you decided to go into tech because you didn't want to end up doing financial analysis in spreadsheets.
Exactly. Right. And somehow found out that you still need to have that skill, even if it's much more limited.
Yeah. And we both kind of live in spreadsheets now anyway. Yeah.
Totally. So yeah, that's one failure. I'm sure there's many more that I've put to the back of my mind.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff I learned about people relationships and how to act in the workplace, just how to be professional, how to have a grade A work quality. And it's just come over like years of having honest one-on-ones with managers and, just challenging myself to do better. It's been a lot of minor things that have added up.
Yeah, management in particular, I find is one where you really only learn that by doing it a ton and being terrible at it.
Yeah.
It's something that I have always been, I think, kind of bad at and slowly trying to get better, but it feels like you just have to screw up at it a lot and just get a lot of feedback from other people who are better at it, who themselves had to screw up at it a lot in order to get better at it.
Right. At one of my jobs, I had a manager I very much disliked. And I took that as an opportunity to understand if I was ever in a management role, how would I not manage? And basically what I realized was this person was managing by fear in a lot of cases, but also there were 8 members of our team and he was managing all of the 8 people the exact same. But there were 8 distinct personalities. So the general rule of thumb that I've come to learn is that each person, you got to learn what incentivizes them and makes them work hard, makes them feel fulfilled, and then manage each of them individually based off of that. And if you can do that, it seems that people are just happier and do better at their job.
Well, that's a great way to learn how to get better at something, is to look at somebody doing it really badly and try to identify what's bad about it.
Mm-hmm.
I know that for writing in particular, that's really great, is to read just some not great writing or not great copy and compare it to good writing and good copy and try to see what the differences are and like how it makes you feel, word choice, things like that. It stands out so much better there than if you just look at somebody doing it well.
Yeah. I think there was a recent interview with Kobe Bryant where he said he would just watch the video playback of, different plays where he made mistakes. And then he would highlight those in red on the screen and then go back to the court and physically go through the right way to do it. And the muscle memory made him, so much better, so much faster because he just identified what was wrong, put it in place with what worked and what he was supposed to do. And then he did it right the next time.
And it probably prevents you from just practicing the things that you're already good at so that you feel good about yourself, which is always a temptation.
Always a temptation.
Yep.
Yeah.
Have there been any books that have had a really big impact to you, either during college or post-grad?
I think one of the best books I read was Traction. And
by Justin Gabriel or
by Justin Gabriel. Yeah. And there's another one that I'm forgetting about, but it was a very similar theme that talked about how to effectively test your MVP. I forget. It was by Eric Ries.
Lean Startup?
Yeah, Lean Startup. Yeah, exactly. That was a assigned reading for the True Ventures internship. And so I've learned a lot through those 2 books. Another thing that I think has been very helpful to me is through the Uber ride experience. One of my friends introduced me to this guy named Jeff Lowe, who founded a venture capital firm in Los Angeles called Arena Ventures. And he was extremely excited by this type of like hacky arbitrage of promo codes. And I got to know him very well over the 1.5 or 2 years I was at Google. Then he started a VC fund and I decided to invest in it as a limited partner. And I did the bare minimum amount to basically have my name on the paperwork so I could learn how they evaluate deals. So, and it was an exception because usually those guys they commit way more money than I did. But he was a friend of mine and he had the pull to still allow me in. And the reason that was valuable is because now I can get the emails on companies they're considering. I can talk with other founders. I can see their pitch decks in some cases. And I totally use it as like a learning experience.
Oh, that's great. Especially when you want to start something of your own. You'll have all of that data.
Yeah. And I look at their decks and I talk to the people who are evaluating them and they say, oh, well, this slide didn't convey a true point to us. Or this slide made us ask a question that they couldn't answer or things like that. So the books, are definitely helpful, but I just consume better with those types of experiences. Try to put myself in a situation where I can have a real live conversation with someone who, again, has an expertise that I don't, and learn that way.
What about any non-marketing, non-business books that have had a big impact on you?
I don't think there's any books in particular that I read anymore that have had a huge impact. I look at like my father, and I try to just identify people in my life that have traits that I would love to have. So like friends who are super into fitness, or just friends who like treat others really well. And I just go spend time with them. And I try to have that type of behavior rub off on me. So that I'd say, if I had more time maybe if I made more time, I'm sure there's a lot of books that I have on a list in my pocket and an iPad that I would want to be reading, but I try to just surround myself with people that have skills or attributes that I find endearing and try to learn from them through like seeing how they act in their behavior.
Do you have anything systematized for finding these interesting people, or is it just ones who you come across and meet via connections?
Honestly, it's just organic when I come across them. Yeah, I feel like that's how I approach any like networking opportunity. I feel like people can sniff out real quick if you're non-genuine and it is systematized. And I've always found it to be much more impactful to, like, for example, with my mentor, Chris from Doorman. Some people would want to go get 2 or 3 or 4 mentors. And I just focused on getting one and spending as much time with that person as I could, getting as deep as I could. I feel like that is more valuable over time.
And it lets you go way deeper and get a fuller understanding instead of a collection of surface level understandings. I mean, even just if you're thinking about quality of a friend network, right? I think people are happier if they have fewer really deep ties than tons and tons of shallow ones.
Exactly. You get to know people better, you get real conversations, and you just feel like it teaches you more, you get more out of it.
Definitely. Obviously, we've covered a ton, which has been amazing. And I feel like there's going to be a lot of value here for everyone listening. Is there anything that we touched on that you really want to reiterate, or that we didn't get to that you think will be useful around education, your experience post-college, that you want to leave the audience with?
I don't think there's anything new, but I would just want to reiterate the idea of not being afraid to ask for what you want, and not letting the fear that someone won't respond positively to you reaching out via email or a letter or a pizza that says hire me. I think if you take those chances, good opportunities come your way, and I would just encourage people to do that and not be afraid about who the recipient is, and see what doors it opens.
Definitely. And that'll be a good challenge for everyone listening to reach out to. They could reach out to us or whoever they've been putting off.
If anyone does that and has a great story about responses, I'd love to know.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
And I'm excited to put this out in people's hands.
Likewise.
Have a good night. You too. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Nat Chat. If you enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe to Nat Chat in iTunes, Stitcher, Overcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. Second, if you're trying to take advantage of some of the information from this episode, be sure you check out the show notes at nataliason, nateliason.com/podcast, and find a friend, because implementing a lot of this stuff is much easier if you have somebody to do it with. And finally, if you enjoyed this episode and you've been enjoying other episodes of the podcast, please leave it a review on iTunes, Stitcher, wherever you listen to your casts, so that more people can find it. This is the best way for it to get some more exposure and to make sure that I can keep bringing these episodes to you. With that, thank you and have an awesome rest of your day.